Hello and welcome to the Sensual Being podcast with myself, your host, Jolene Whiting. I have been a pole dance teacher for nearly 20 years. I'm also a yoga instructor, and my favourite pastimes are connecting to my own sensuality, connecting with the world, and connecting with animals as well. In this podcast, you'll find new and inventive ways of how you see yourself, connecting yourself with others, and also how you see and view the world around you. For this episode, we are diving into the fact that Sensual Being is 1 year old. 1 year old, which is amazing. And we're going to dive into my insights of having run a podcast for a whole year. Oh my God. Hello, you wonderful sensual being, and welcome back to the Sensual Being podcast. This episode is a milestone episode. It's amazing to think, guess what? The podcast is now a year old. It's been published for a year. Oh my God. I'm flabbergasted by the fact that I've managed to do this and commit to 2 episodes a week with the intentions and the fuller episodes. And it brings me a lot of pleasure to know that this has reached so many of you. So thank you so much for joining me on this quest. Or maybe this is your first episode and you're like, what? It's been going a year. What have I missed? Plenty for you to catch up on. No rush. So this episode, we are going to have a look at how this podcast has affected my life over the last year and what I've learned from it, because it has certainly brought up a lot of different feelings for me. And now I started this, as a lot of you know, I started this on the anniversary of my dad's passing, which is the 13th of May. So he'd passed away quite a long time ago, over 10 years ago now. But every day it's still this is the thing with grief, is that you don't get over it. You never do. But rather than letting that grief carry you through your life, you learn how to carry the grief through your life. Because you don't get over it, you don't magically get better or anything like that. Life just evolves in a new way, and that new way is your path to find. And that path led me down a much more spiritual, holistic path of mindfulness, appreciation, and acceptance in this moment. And this is something that I would really want to get through to people, get out to people, because so many of us lead such busy lives and we don't seem to hone in on what's important, and which is why I wanted to start doing the podcast. So things like in my pole dancing classes, there'd be conversations had about how people were feeling about themselves, and there's just not enough time in that hour to talk about this sort of thing. And to be honest, people come learning pole, so it's not relevant to talk about these things in such a big way. Hence why I wanted to start the podcast. And also the fact that there's so much societal conditioning through ourselves as we grow up, as we go through school, television, news, how we're dictated to lead our lives. You know, when you start to see the societal conditioning, you start to realize how much our voice has been silenced in ways. So again, another reason to birth this podcast was through all of those things. But what's happened along the way has just been beautiful in many, many ways. I've had people come to me and say, I mean, there's probably a lot of you that listen to the podcast and I've never heard from you. And that's okay too. Please know that is okay too. But if you ever want to reach out and say hello, you are more than welcome. You are more than welcome. But I've heard comments from people who have said they feel less alone when they hear my podcast, and that feels like a wonderful connective way of me being with that person and talking to them, even though I'm not physically right there in the room with them. So it feels very special to have a comment like that. Many people have said various things that they have taken to their families and talked to their families about things, particularly around gratitude. And it seems like it's changed some of their ways of being, and they've spread this out to their own family and friends, which I find, again, incredibly impactful. But one of the most impactful ones was definitely my mum, when she said to me a few months ago, she said, do you know what, since listening to your podcast, I feel like I've got this new acceptance around myself and appreciation about myself that I never had before. And to be honest, that comment, if I never had any other comments before or after that, that comment is enough to drive me, to keep me going. Because we are never too young or too old to hear any of the messages that I put out. They are here for all of us. We are all at different points in our lives of realizing our own superpowers and being empowered. So to hear that from my mum, I was just in tears and gave her a massive hug, because I was just like, wow, that is feedback that drives me forward and makes me realize that my message is getting out there to people. And that is just, it's amazing. So that is just brilliant. And if you are someone who's never told me any of this, but you feel impacted by some of the words that I've said or some of my ways of thinking, then I'm just so grateful that it has reached you too. So I'm incredibly grateful for that. Some things that have crept in though, stats. Oh, the statistics of like how episodes are doing and downloads and all this sort of stuff. Wow, that's quite hard to get past, isn't it? As you know, my journey with social media, I do often turn off likes. I unfollow some people who follow me if they don't look like real people, and I'm not bothered about the number of people following me, or I try not to be. I work on that. It's a work in progress. So if I feel like it looks like a load of bots have followed my account, I would just delete them, because I don't want that figure, because I don't want them there. But the stats, so I'm going to go on to the monetization of this podcast, because I don't feel like it's something that I want to be monetized. So I don't really think it's going to have the same impact for me if I'm recording it to make money. But the stats that come up are things like you have to have a certain amount of downloads every month to be able to run adverts on it. And you probably know how I feel about adverts anyway. So you get caught up in the stats, and then you start comparing it to other podcasts that you listen to. Because I do love podcasts, and I've got some of my favorites that I listen to, and some of them I've been listening to for years. So my statistics will never compare to theirs, but it's so hard not to let that in. Oh my God, so hard. If anybody is interested, I thought I'd let you know what I use to actually edit. So I use a dynamic microphone, which a lot of people for podcasts don't, but I actually find it works really good for me. And it's a lovely mic that I'm borrowing off my partner. But yeah, so I use a dynamic microphone, but it does mean that I can't move. So I have to be very still, because if I move and go away from the microphone, my voice will go. So I have to be very aware of that. So some people might like that, some people won't. I use GarageBand. I've got an Apple Mac and I use GarageBand, and it's free. I use that to edit all my podcasts. And also I use Buzzsprout to host it. And Buzzsprout so far have been amazing for me. And it sends it out using an RSS feed to all the different platforms. So I only upload it to Buzzsprout. I set when I want it to go, and it just puts it out for me. Never had a problem with it. Always been very good. So I thought, if you were interested in doing a podcast, there's no reason why you can't. And those sorts of, well, GarageBand is free. Buzzsprout, I do pay for hosting. But you can actually do a small amount of hosting for free, I think. So you could even just test out doing a podcast, couldn't you? No reason why not. But something I find has been quite interesting is that I started the longer episodes being around 10 to 15 minutes. And I think that was a good starting point for me personally. And I still haven't branched out in having guests on yet, because the whole doing an interview seems very daunting. But it is something. I've got a line of guests waiting to come on and share their stories and insights with you. So I'm going to try and do that in year 2 of podcasting. So I'm going to take that little leap of faith and see if I can get set up to do that. My main reason why I haven't done it, are you ready? It's basically because I want the sound quality to be really, really good. And I'm worried in case I'm getting set up or trying to get set up and having somebody do an interview with me and they don't have a microphone. And I really want the sound to be the best for you. Because I don't know if you've had this before, but I've even switched off podcasts because I'm like, that is just not clear. Or one person has been loud and the other person's been quiet. I've been very fortunate, the ones I've been a guest on so far, that it's actually worked out really well and the sound's been really good. But that is a little bit of a paranoia from my part. But I'm going to see if I can get some guests for you this year and interview some people for you, because honestly, I have a beautiful selection of people who have amazing journeys and stories for you, and they're just so inspiring and impactful. I'd love to share that with you. So let's see what happens there, shall we? Now, sharing, the length of the episode was like 10-15 minutes, but then somebody said to me, she said, I love your podcast, but they were a bit short. And I thought, okay, I'm going to sit with that. Okay. So I've gradually managed to get them up and have more content in them to be like around between like 18 and 22 minutes. I try and get them about there. And that actually worked out okay. But I think it had to be the way it was in the start, just to give me more confidence. Because as a lot of you know about my voice journey, it's new. And sharing my voice is, do you know what? Sharing voice is very scary. I've even had people turn on me over the past year because I've been sharing my opinions. I've had, it's been a bit hostile from one person in particular. And this person was a friend of mine for years. And she was then turned to be very hostile towards me. And it's one of those things, if you're going to share your voice and your opinion, and you're not trying to force anybody to have the same opinion. I'm very open about this is my experience and your experience is valid for you. And we're all trying to navigate this life together. But I have had some hostility towards me. And to be honest, it's only driven me on to be stronger. Because I'm not, if that person wants to turn on me after a few years of friendship because I'm being myself, then that person is not my friend. And if they don't want to be my friend, I can't make them. And quite frankly, right now, I don't. After they were hostile towards me, that's it, we're done. I won't let myself be put into that position. So that's been interesting. The other interesting one has been about support. Now, if you, for example, write a book, it could be like 300 pages. It's a commitment for somebody to sit there and read it. So they'd have to be emotionally involved in your subject or story to want to actually read that. The podcasting is a little bit of the same, although I'd argue it's less time for them to invest. But some people who have been close to me for years, it's interesting. They are not interested in listening to the podcast. They'll show you support. It was well done. How's it going? But they've never listened to it themselves. And it's that interesting feeling of if somebody knows me now as this person who I am today, And they've just met me today and they know I do yoga, pole dancing, teacher, and blah, 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 and do a podcast. And they'll be like, okay, cool. And now respect me in that moment for who I am right now. But the problem is when people know you before you even did any of that, some people have a hard time accepting that you do know something now, or you are published now, or you are, I don't know, more accomplished or more further forward, or you've learnt more stuff, or you might be more knowledgeable about something. It's hard for them to accept that you have actually progressed, and therefore they don't listen to you. And I'm currently doing the dog training at the moment. And one of the things that my trainer, he said to me, he said, the hardest people that will ever be to learn from you will be the people close to you, because they remember you when you didn't know anything. So therefore now you do know something, they still have you labeled as somebody who didn't. And those are the harder people to actually get through to. So it's been interesting that my closer friends, some of them, not all, some of them won't even dive into it. And somebody even said to help me get my stats up, she'll just put it on in the background on quiet. And I was like, well, what's the point? Don't listen to it then. She goes, well, I want to help you get your stats up. I said, yeah, but that's not why I'm doing it. I'm doing it to reach people and to help people. And if you think that by showing me support, you'll just play it on silent in the background when you're not listening to it, I said, what's the point? It's a waste of time. And they couldn't seem to understand that their level of showing support, I didn't feel was any sort of support at all to anybody, me, them, anything. So it's interesting, but I do love the fact that my biggest fan is my mum. She's the first one to listen to every episode. She'll always come to me and go, oh my God, this one's great. It made me think about this, that, and the other. And I love that. And I do get a lot of inspiration from my mum as well. But the times to be inspired to record are so sporadic. I often find that when I've been doing my rituals, if I've been having like a cacao ceremony for myself, a bit of sun worship and singing, chanting, dancing, I feel I might get a download, inspiration come through and want to record there and then. But what I have found is that I need to trust in that process, just because I don't like to feel pressured that, oh my God, I've got an episode needs to be released tomorrow. I don't have anything ready. I don't like to get to that point, but I have to trust that the inspiration will come. And that has been hard. And it's been hard because I've done that to myself, because I set the parameter of wanting to release 2 episodes a week. Therefore, I've created my own pressure. At the end of the day, if I didn't release an episode, it's okay. I can forgive myself. But I don't want to not, because obviously the reasons why I'm doing it. So I do want episodes to go out there. But sometimes I feel like, oh my God, what am I going to talk about? And I can even, this is going to sound really stupid now, but I can even be paralyzed by my own comparison. So sometimes now, because there's like over 100 episodes in total, including the little 1-minute intentions, but there's over 50 episodes, full episodes of different topics and musings and inspirational ideas. There's over 50 of them now. And I find sometimes I think, God, what am I going to talk about? Oh my God. And I've just got to trust that the feeling of a subject will come through. And I find sometimes when I look down at the titles and I think, I can't believe I've done this in a year. And I'm like, again, flabbergasted by it. I really am. I'm so in awe of the fact that I have turned up every day. And some of you have been with me right from the start. And some of you are newer listening. Some people just dip in, and that's okay too, because the beauty of it now is that you can look down all the different topics and think, oh, what do I need to listen to today? And then you can pick a topic that feels relevant for your mood or what you need right now. And I love that. I love that there's a back catalogue now that you can actually just dip in and enjoy without the pressure of, oh, I missed last week's episode, I won't understand what happens next in this week. It's not like that at all. And I love that it's still, the name Sensual Being still really works for me, because I like the fact that it can be so varied. So some of the time we're talking about like confidence. Sometimes I love the mirror episode. It's one of my favorite episodes. Sometimes we're talking about inner thoughts, meditations, other times about judgment, but then also on the side of intimacy, kink, sensuality, sexuality. And it's so varied. But when I think, can I niche it anymore? I think at the moment I can't, because you need all of these different areas to be a sensual being. Sensual means using your senses. And sensual can also mean a little bit more like the seductive side of life, the lustful side of life. But you need it all to be a sensual being. So if we're talking about judgment, and in the next week I'm talking about kink, you don't necessarily need kink, but you need intimacy. And you can't easily have intimacy if you're not feeling confident. Can you see the link? So this is why there are so many different tangents on sensual being, because we are so multifaceted that we cannot be one thing or another. And recognizing the all that we have in us, the all parts of us, and to be able to become more aware of ourselves is the whole point. It's the whole point of life, because the more you can do that, then the more you can move through your life with love, appreciation, acceptance. And that means that when times get hard and bad things happen and you need to go through it, because we all need to go through it. It's part of life. It's part of the balance. You don't know what it's like to feel happy unless you've been sad. You don't know to appreciate the joy and contentment if you've been unhappy and in an area of uncertainty. So we do need to go through this, but the difference is that if you can become more aware of yourself, maybe you have tools in place that actually help you, like so many on this podcast. There's tools in place that can help you, and you think, journaling is really good for me. Okay, I'll try and journal regularly, but I know that that's a tool that's there for me if times are hard or I can't understand what's going on in my head. Things like that, or meditation or dancing, walking, exercise, so many different things. But when we can become aware of those tools, things that help us when times are bad, and we can use those, we can come through it in a, I want to say easier way, but that's not always going to feel easy at the time. I don't even want to say faster way, but we just have ways of helping ourselves get through. And that is one of the biggest reasons, again, for doing this podcast, is to be able to give my ways to you to hopefully help you. And then you're always free to give your ways to me to help me, because that's how we work here. That's how we work. It's two-way. So I just want to say thank you so much to you. New listener, old listener, I don't mind. One-time listener, that's fine too. Thank you for being here. And congratulations to all of us for making Sensual Being a year old. Thank you so much. Remember to lead through your life with your heart and to live with intention. Thank you so much for tuning in today. If you enjoyed this episode, please do share it with your friends and on social media. If you have the time to rate or review this podcast, I'd be ever so grateful. If you'd like to follow me on Instagram, you can find me at Jolene Sensual Being. The links to my YouTube and to sign up to my mailing list will be in the show notes as well. I look forward to speaking with you again very soon.